Everybody, got the G-Man again here with my tip number 4. And this is another system setting, but what we want to talk about today is I want to talk about your sources. I recently was in a parts department. It was about a $500,000 inventory, and they have everything in one single source. Now, in saying that, I'm going to get a divided reaction. I'm going to get, some people that go, because they use multiple sources, and I'm going to get other people that go, so what, G-Man? What does that mean? Well, here's the thing about sourcing. I don't know that there's anything terribly wrong with keeping all your parts into one source. It's not going to break the system, and you still can order parts. You can still do a lot of different things. However, as you get more advanced with your management of the inventory, breaking your sources into multiples will help you to manage your parts. Because if you think about it, if you go back, back in the day when this first started, we really were dealing with demand-driven parts, right? So what that meant was a part had a failure rate. So a water pump was going to start leaking, and based on how it was manufactured, that leaking was going to continue and escalate, and you were going to be ordering a lot of those parts until the manufacturer, the supplier, fixed whatever was wrong with the part. Then that will start to come down that curve. You'll be on the backside of that curve, and you won't need the part again, right? The failure rate will start to come down. And so that's what we call demand driven. So at some point you're ordering one, or somebody's asking for it once, then twice, then 10, then 25, then 100. And then it comes down the other side of the demand curve. So those are demand-driven parts. Somebody's asking for it, that part's going to fail. Well, you have things that aren't demand-driven, like, let's say, a bumper or a fender. Those parts, while somebody's going to be asking for them, they do not have a failure curve. They are going to be a result of an accident, right? So that's not going to have a predictable model. That's going to be more about chaos than it is about predictability or algorithms. So those are less demand driven. Then you're going to have things that are even further from that, which are what we would call speculative parts. And speculative means you're speculating on whether or not you're going to be able to sell that. And you may or may not be right. And we don't speculate in parts. We've been taught we don't speculate on demand driven parts. We order only based on what the demand is. And so now what we're saying is, well, we're going to have these parts like, let's say, t-shirts or hats or mugs or umbrellas. All your boutique items are going to be a speculative inventory. You're going to have anything aftermarket that you buy. You're going to have accessories, especially accessories. There really is no demand curve for selling accessories, and it really depends on the model, the type of car you have, and how strong your sales department is. In most cases, or how strong your online store is as to how many accessories you're going to sell. And I'm going to go in deep into accessories and boutique managing here in the future. But what I'm talking about right now is sources. So you can set those parts up in special sources so that your system was going to react differently. So also you're going to have parts that you have to do that with. So let's say bulk oil and tires and batteries. You're going to have certain things that you're going to be forced to put into other sources because of the way they're going to react. Like bulk oil is typically tied to a different inventory on the GL, a different inventory account. You're going to need to tie that to that inventory account. Also with tires, most dealers right now are inventorying tires in a separate inventory account on the GL. Those are not going to be tied to what you're looking at unless you create a separate source and a separate sale account. So separate sources are going to become a necessity as the more you get into how you're managing your inventory, the more it's going to require of you in terms of creating separate sources. So for me, you're going to need a certain amount of sources, and you probably want to get a pen and write this down. But first of all, you're going to need a source that I would use for testing. So I don't keep any on-hand parts in this source. I only want part numbers as we're bringing them in. So if a new model comes out, let's say, and there's a whole grouping of new parts then I'm going to put those in what I would call my testing source, right? So that is going to be my first source. My second source I'm going to use is I'm going to use a source for my active parts. So anything that I'm putting on the shelf that's going to become an active part, I'm going to move into that source so I can measure those separate from the testing parts that I'm just looking at and monitoring their demand and determining whether or not they're going to become part of my inventory. The next source I would recommend you have is going to be what I would call a price sensitive source. So we're going to go into pricing model in another tip, but I do want to cover this just briefly. You want to make sure that you have a price matrix set up for your regular inventory parts that's going to help you with profitability. And then you're going to want to have a source set aside for price sensitive parts, oil filters, maybe air filters, depending upon your market, bulbs, potentially batteries. You're going to want to put some bolts, not all bolts. If you have some manufacturer specific case hardened fracture bolts, anything like that, you're not going to want to put in the price sensitive source, but anything else like standard hardware, you're going to want to put in there. And then you're going to want to set up a price matrix that's a little bit different than where your main parts are going to be in. You're going to want to put a source in there for body parts. You're going to want to inventory, just like I was talking about with fenders and bumpers, are not going to follow the same demand curve. You may get 3 wrecks of a certain model in a month, and that may not come again, for a while. So I want to look at those very closely. I don't want to have a lot of sheet metal on my shelf that's going to be ripe for damage. That's going to cause me a lot of problems. So I want to inventory those separately. So I'm going to set up a separate source for that. And I already mentioned the other 3. You're going to want to have tires. For sure, if you have a special inventory for that, you're going to want to put those in a separate source. You're going to want to have your bulk oil. I'm almost positive you're going to need that in a separate source, just based on almost every setup I've ever seen. And then you're going to have one possibly for batteries. Just depends on how you order batteries. I've seen that done both ways. Sometimes batteries are part of your standard inventory based on how the manufacturer looks at them, and sometimes they're not. You can get really granular with this if you want. That's kind of like the base layout that I would recommend. You can add sources for boutique items. You can manage that separately. You could add sources for your accessory items, so you can look at those in a separate way. I've seen guys break up their sourcing based on cost. So if you want to get a little bit more aggressive with your phase in, this is the area where you can do it. You can put another source in, and you can phase parts in a little bit faster in that source. But you want to make sure that you're not getting some of your higher dollar parts lumped in with that. So you want to keep those sources clear, and only the parts that are supposed to be in there are in there. There are so many ways you can. I've seen guys with 20, 30 sources in a lot of different cases. And as long as you understand why they're there, you're monitoring them, you're able to measure them. It doesn't overcomplicate how you're running your stock orders. That's really the main thing about it, is that you can manage what sources you have. So if you inherited a parts department that has 20 or 25 sources, you might want to consider shrinking those down and then starting to build it back up again based on your methodology, on how you want to manage your inventory. If you inherited a parts department where everything's in one source, I want you to start thinking about layering in some of the basic sources that you're going to need to manage your parts more effectively, right? More efficiently, and get a better return on investment for the dealer, because really that's what it's all about. You're going to hear me mention that a lot as I go through these 30 tips, is you're really trying to maximize the investment for the dealer. And that's a critical component, because he's entrusted you with this sum of cash, and it is cash. And what he's asking is that you handle that and get him the best return possible. And so by getting a little bit more granular, measuring things a little bit deeper, stocking things a little bit different based on the type of part it is going to help you. And the way you're going to do that is through your sources. So if you have questions on that, as always, reach out to me, And I hope you got something out of this tip. This is a complex one, and one that I might talk about again going forward. But in the beginning, just understand. Go back to your system settings, take a look, understand what you have, and try to determine if that best fits your model. If not, shrink it down or grow it out, whichever one best fits how you want to manage your parts department. Hey everybody, G-Man here. I want to say thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you got something out of it. If you did, if you got any value at all, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube so you can stay up to date with all the content that we're bringing out. And if you have any questions at all or you need help with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Leave a comment on Facebook or YouTube, or you can email us, Gary@jdicoaching.com, and we'll get right back to you. Thanks again.